Alright guys, so today we're going to be working on the EGR delete on my Ram. Plan is to powder coat some of these parts before they're installed. Obviously the hose is going to stay black, can't really do anything with it. If I paint it, it's just going to come off of it and it's going to look like crap the whole time. I'm going to powder coat some of these parts. I'm going to pull off some parts from my engine bay, powder coat those too. Plan is to pull the intake horn off, powder coat it, and I'm going to try to pull the housing off the turbo and powder coat it. That is the plan. If I can get them all apart, cool, and then I'll powder coat them. It is going to be two-tone because this plate, I believe it's this one, yeah, this plate here sits on top of the intake horn, and this one will go on the end of it because throttle valve delete, and this is the one that's on top of the intake horn. These two, I'm not going to worry about them. I was going to powder coat them, but what's the point? It's going to burn off anyways. They sit right on top of the manifold. Why waste my time and money if it's not going to last, you know, half hour down the road, if that. This fitting, I thought about powder coating it, but the only part you're going to see is this little knurl right here, because you got a hose coming on this side and a hose coming on the other side. So there's just certain parts I'm going to powder coat and certain parts I'm not. The bracket's obviously getting powder coated, it'll be orange. Obviously, if you've seen other videos, my engine cover's already orange, or the crankcase cover's already orange. So I'm just trying to clean up underneath my engine bay. That's why I'm taking my turbo housing off, the intake horn off, which actually I think I have an old intake horn right here off one of my old trucks that I put an aftermarket intake on, or I put an aftermarket high flow intake horn on. So that is obviously that plate on top of the intake horn, and this is your throttle valve here. It opens and closes. It goes right there on the end. So I'll be taking this off, powder coating it. I think I'm going to do this orange and the plates in the charcoal color. That way, if I ever decide to change out this intake horn, I can just powder coat it orange and be done with it. But other than that, I'm going to start tearing the truck apart. I'm going to go up there, start doing that first. See what we get done. Alright guys, so underneath the hood here, you have this nice fancy cover. I think they're 10mm. There's 4 bolts holding it, plus your dipstick. Yeah, take that off. That pretty much is the start of everything, because here's your cooler. There's the EGR piece that's on top of the intake horn. Your throttle valve, it's kind of under a cover. It's right here. There is a crossover tube underneath this cover. Some people put these covers back on, some people don't. It's just depends. I've put them back on trucks, and then I've accidentally bumped them and broke them, and then just removed them completely. I mean, it depends on the person. I'm also going to be removing my intake so that I can get down into down past everything. this is more opened up, you'll be able to see it a little better. So I'm going to start by taking this off. Alright guys, so they are 8mm to take those off. I was wrong. And now that I got it off, you guys can kind of see the crossover pipe here, how it works. So all that's got to be removed. Here's the intake horn that I said that's getting powder coated. I may actually pull the bracket for the dipstick off too, powder coat it while I'm at it. I mean, just something else to clean up underneath the hood. I don't think this shielding is going to go back on. I may leave it off. I'm just going to remove the wiring from it and put the wiring in the back of the engine, or well, back underneath here where you can't see it, just to try to clean it up some underneath here. I mean, it doesn't help that there's, you know, leaves everywhere underneath here already, but I'm going to start tearing all this apart. They say to drain the coolant. I mean, you're going to get coolant everywhere because there is coolant in this, but I'm just going to put pan underneath it and catch what I can. Alright guys, so I removed the intake piping. I left the box. Didn't need to remove the box. So if you guys still have the factory intake on your truck and you never actually pulled the it's kind of like a silencer, baffle, whatever you want to call it, out of this pipe, all you do is take this clamp off. You could do it with it still in the truck. Take this clamp off and this clamp, pull this pipe out, and it's like a foam outer rounding with the plastic, kind of like a plus symbol with a bunch of holes in it. They call it a silencer baffle. I honestly don't think it changed the sound. I took it out. I didn't notice any gain or anything, but I feel it restricts some air. But it is inside this canister. That was like one of the first things I did when I bought the truck. But if you are taking this intake tube off, I don't remember this, but there is a rubber piece to keep this clamp from moving, and it was giving me a lot of trouble trying to get it off. Once I realized there was rubber on there holding that clamp in place, I was able to get it right off. So that's out of the way. I can now see the turbo. So this what I'm working on is getting the turbo housing out and getting the intake horn out before I remove the EGR parts. I want to get those out, get them powder coated before I dig into the EGR part, because once I get those powder coated and they're cooling down, I can remove the rest of the stuff. Alright guys, so come down here. It's 11mm. Take this clamp off for this turbo boot. Be careful not to rip these boots, because the other side on the intercooler is a non-removable clamp. So if you rip this boot, you have to cut this and get 2 new clamps and a new boot, which not a big deal, but that's what you're gonna have to do if you do rip it. So the clamp for the turbo is by the engine block. Not super easy to get to, but that's where it's at. So I believe it's also 11mm. Let me check real quick. Yes, it is also an 11mm. So I will go grab a ratchet and start removing that. Alright guys, so V-band clamp that turbo on. Obviously the nut was in a terrible spot to get to. Start with the boot, taking it off, which, there's the boot. Whatever you do after you have it off, do not hit these fins or nick them in any way, because you will ruin them. But there's your turbo housing. There is a little wire clip down at the bottom you have to take off. Alright guys, so I took the crossover pipe out. As you can see, these are 11mm clamps on both sides, which I can't get that clamp out, it's kind of jammed. This clamp down here, which it's this bracket on, clamp bracket, it's a P clamp. It's a 8mm bolt. I just kind of push down the rat hose and use the ratchet to take it out. But now I can get to pulling the intake horn. And then while that stuff's baking and everything, I can do the rest of the stuff on the manifold. Alright guys, so piece off the top of the intake manifold is 410 millimeters. Take it off. So I pulled it off, and I would be using my GoPro to do all this stuff, but I'm not sure where my GoPro is right now, so that's why this video is in pieces like it is, and I have to do it with my phone. I can't hold my phone and tear everything apart. Alright guys, so intake horn's off, and if yours is like mine, it's probably filled with soot. I don't think I've ever taken one off that wasn't filled with soot. There's your grid heater there, which some people delete. I can't honestly say that I ever wait to start, unless it gets super cold here, closer to the negatives. But anyways, to remove this, you have one plug. I mean, if you didn't delete your truck yet and you're just now doing it, you'll still have this plug on the backside, which was already unplugged. It's been unplugged for a couple months now. But if you're taking the intake horn off, you have 6 bolts. One will be on top. It's real long. It is connected to the dipstick bracket. It's this center one here. You'll have to wiggle it back to get it past this injector line before you pull it off. They're 10mm, and the clamp down here is 11mm. And then you'll just have to pop all the wires off that are hooked on the sides. The heat shield, one of the bolts were 13, the other one was 10. But other than that, that's off. I'm gonna take these parts down, get ready to start powder coating them, and come back up and finish the door. Alright guys, so I have the turbo housing down here, and I have the intake manifold. For the turbo housing, it's just gonna get cleaned pretty much. This clamp's gonna come off. There's a little bit of oil residue on the inside here, plus soot. It's gonna need clean, pre-baked, you know, whole 9 yards. So you'll hear people say about the silencer rings on these. So on this being a 6.7, it's completely different. A 5.9 will have a little clip on the inside here, and you can pretty much knock that clip out and pull this insert out, which will be like this. Pull it out and you'll hear more turbo whistle. And being that this is obviously a 6.7 with a VGT, you have to drill out that punch, or that pin, and that pin, and that pin. Now, from my understanding, some people say they sound better, some people say they don't, some people say they hurt the turbo, some people say they don't. I honestly don't have an answer for you guys. I'm not doing it to mine. I tried to get the one out of one of my 5.9s, the clip, and it was so rusted in that I couldn't get it out. But on the 5.9s, I know they sound good. On these, I keep hearing mixed stories, so I'm not going to tell you guys that it's good, it's bad, but that's how you get it out. You knock them pins out. You got to drill them out, and then once you get them out, you take this center ring out and pull it out. But I'm leaving mine in, so I'll get this cleaned up, pull, this is pretty much just bend this little metal tab and you pull it out. Hey, if I get my fingers in there. Like that. And then this, so this bracket's gonna come off. This needs cleaned off, which is the gasket for the EGR piece that was on top. Obviously the sensor's gonna come off, and the throttle valve's gonna come off. The soot and everything's gonna be cleaned up on the inside. Needs pre-baked. I'll probably pull these studs on each side if I can get them out. If not, I'll just tape them off. So after that, after I get them pre-baked and everything, get it powder coated. Like I said, these will be orange. This bracket will be orange. I might do this piece here too. I mean, it's just a little tiny piece. And I might do this little metal piece here. Other than that, everything else is going to be the color it is, except for this stuff. It's going to be the charcoal color. It's on my truck. Alright guys, so this is with pre-baking parts. That is the oil burning out of the parts. That is pretty much the main reason you do it. I'd brake clean these parts ahead of time and everything, but there's places you just can't get into. And right now the oil is baking out of these parts. And that's why it's really, I don't know if you can see the smoke in here, but it's very smoky in here. Alright guys, all those parts are in pre-bake. I'm going to start removing the EGR system on the passenger side here. Obviously, like I said before, mine's been disconnected for a while, so unplug your connectors here and take them off, which it's got a locking tab. Pull it back, and then you can unclip it. And then this one here, you just push it in. But to get this removed, there should be 2 block-off plates that go in here, and then there's a few fittings that go over here, but all on that hose. But I'm gonna start pulling that apart. I gotta pull those parts out here in a little bit from pre-bake, and then I can start powder coating stuff. Alright guys, so before I get too far ahead, there was a heat shield here. Let me put this piece back. Alright, so this was here. There was a heat shield right in here that hooks onto there's these studs that go in here. On them studs there's nuts that hold a heat shield that sits right in here. You gotta take that out first, and then there's a heat shield down here. It should have, I think, 2 8mm bolts and a 10mm nut. Take those 2 heat shields out first, and then take these 10mm studs out. There's 4 of them. It'll hold this front half on, and there will be a gasket in there. Then you're going to want to take your servo motor off. I believe these are also 10mm, if I'm not mistaken. Nope, they're 8s. But that'll be the next step, is take the servo motor off, which obviously mine's already unplugged. You gotta unplug it if not. Alright guys, so once you get them bolts out, this is loose. Now your wires are stuck on this bracket here. And that bracket's held by these bolts back here. And those bolts down there. Alright guys, so these are the parts that are going to be charcoal. As you can see, I taped off a good portion of this piece. The reason for that is this piece here is where your cold side intercooler pipe comes on, and you do not want that sliding off. So you don't want to powder coat that, because you risk that pipe sliding off all the time. So I'm leaving that bare. Obviously the bottom side of it, the gasket's going to be there, not powder coating it either. This is the EGR block off plate for the top of the intake horn. There we go. Bottom of it really doesn't matter, so it could just sit on the rack. That's the dipstick. I gotta put a silicone piece inside the threads, and then I gotta clean them up yet and shoot them. Alright guys, so I got all the parts that are going to be orange on the rack now. You can see some spots that could use clean better, and I'm not as concerned with it. They're my parts, they're going on my truck, I'm not as concerned with them. They'll still turn out pretty decent. With the turbo, there's a wire, as you can see. It runs up, I don't know if you can see inside there, and it's taped to the side, because the bottom of it is taped solid. Same thing with this wire up inside, that's your ground wire. Same thing with that piece off the intake horn. I have it taped so that this would be the hot side pipe, doesn't fly off. But everything should be taped off and should have plugs in it, except for I got a couple screw holes down there that don't have plugs in them. I don't have enough plugs. Again, my pieces, I'm not as concerned with them. If they're somebody else's, I would do multiple shoots. So I'm gonna get this shot. I'm probably gonna try to clean off these Cummins letters and the whole set, just to kind of give it a little bit of offset. But I got the orange in the gun, and I'm ready to spread. Alright, so take the 10mm bolts out of this top. There's the hose that goes across here. It goes down to your intake, which is also connected to this metal tube. It was here. Your back manifold bolts that obviously look like these. Well, they're studs, I guess. You gotta take these off. I don't know if you guys can see. No, right back there. I don't know if you guys can see, but that little shiny thing kind of back there, yeah, that's it. That is a pain to get out. And then there's one on this side too, but there's so much crap in the way I can't get it on video. That one's not as bad. I just used a 15mm ratchet wrench and got it out. Now there is two 14mm bolts that hold this cradle in, and they are directly under here. And if you go over to where this bolt hole is, come in towards the front just a little bit, you'll find the groove for it too. And then that loosens that up. And then we got to take off some of these hoses to get it out because obviously we're still hooked up. Alright guys, I'm going to put the intake horn back together, going to put the parts back on that I took off, and going to install the block off plate, the throttle valve delete, and obviously that's the stand for the dipstick. But I'm going to put it back together. I got to put the gaskets underneath the block off plate. There's a gasket for the throttle valve, and I think new bolts. Use the existing bolts for the block off plate. That's for your sensor here. Alright guys, so now the front one here, it's just slid in with an O-ring. So all you gotta do is pick up on the back, pull it out. That one over there, same thing, it's just on an O-ring, you just gotta pop it off. Now, you will get a little coolant, but don't worry about it. It's just residual. As you can see, not much actually fell out. I mean, so I'm gonna probably throw my block off plates on next, and then start doing the plumbing. Alright guys, block off plates in. You start building your hose. Now, mine has a EGT probe hole. Put that at the back between your 5 and 6 hole manifold, or on the manifold. That way, if you want to put your EGT there, you can. Mine's down by the turbo, but that's where that one goes. So next step's build the hoses. Coolant hose on. So there's a brass fitting you have to change out here. The old one's not brass, obviously. It's this piece. You take it out and you install the brass fitting that came in the kit. Then you got the silicone hose, which mine could have been shortened up. I just didn't do it. And I powder coated this clamp. It was black originally. Inside there is that black fitting that's knurled on one side, and on the other side it had like 2 spaces and a gap in the center. You stick the O-ring in there and then slide it in. But next I gotta put the bracket on this side, put the vent tube back on, and then put the intake horn back on, and the turbo housing. Alright guys, so there we go, there's the focus. There's that plate. I don't have anything tightened up yet, other than this piece is tightened to here. So these bolts are still loose. I just left them loose till I got everything on and situated before I tightened them. Now I am going to leave this pipe loose until I put the turbo back in, and so I put the intake back in, because the only thing I am going to tighten up is that piece right there, or that bolt there. I'm going to leave the hose off, because whenever I took it off, I kinked the hose, and I don't want to kink it putting it back on. So the next step is going to be tightening up these bolts, and then putting the intake back on, or putting the turbo housing back on. I'll probably do the intake first and then do the turbo, and then I'll tie up all these wires too, so they're not just laying in the engine bay, because I have some thrown up over top of here, and I got the ones off the intake over there. Alright guys, so intake horn's back. I didn't really videotape it much because it's just the opposite of tearing it apart. 6 bolts, obviously up top, put it back in. The V-band, or not the V-band clamp, the clamp down here on the boost tube, and then plug your wire back in. Put your bolt back in your dipstick tube, and it's pretty much cut and dry. I did zip tie my wires up just so they weren't hanging over here, And that other one wasn't hanging down here. They're just kind of zip tied up here. The only thing left to do is put the turbo housing back on and then check the coolant levels. Fire it up. I did notice that I thought this boot would come the whole way up to the top, but it does not. So I kind of wish I would have powder coated this a little further down, but you kind of win some, you lose some. That's probably why it's so long, because that knurl on the bottom of it is clear down here, or bevel, whatever you want to call it. It's clear down here. So, I mean, ain't much you can do about that. I mean, if you really were concerned about it, you could paint it or take it back off, re-powder coat it. But it still looks pretty decent there. This bracket here, if you really wanted to, you could cut it off. I don't believe you can remove it because I think it seals the valve or the crankcase cover. I don't remember. I left it on all my other trucks, but I honestly can't remember. You could put that plastic piece back in the front, but the only bolts that are going to be holding it in is these two front ones. And I'll be honest with you, I broke mine a week, I think, after I put it back in on the first one, and I never put one back in again. I don't remember if I think I might have been changing the fuel filter or checking the oil, doing a service, and I broke it. I just kind of leaned on it a little too hard and broke it. That's just why I usually don't put them back in. It may make it look a little nicer, but maybe if you trim it up some, I don't know. But I'm gonna put the turbo housing back in and then fire it up. Oh, turbo housing and intake back in and then fire it up. Alright guys, so real quick, on the back side of this turbo housing, you'll see this little indent. That is a lineup, and there will be one on the turbo itself too. That is a lineup pin for when you put the housing back on. I just wanted to give you guys that little bit of information so you can spin it around till you feel it fall in, and then you know it's on. Alright guys, so that was a pain in the butt. So I could not get that lined up and put the clamp on and have the turbo free spin. So apparently it wasn't getting flush against the back. I ended up taking the clamp off, trying to see if I could get it lined up flush without the clamp, and I still had no luck. I don't know if there was grime on the turbo or or if it was on the housing, but I ended up cleaning both real good, and it's together now. I wish I would have done that like an hour and a half ago, because it's probably been at least an hour and a half trying to get that together. But it's in there. Turbo spins, doesn't hit the housing, which is a good thing, because if not, that's expensive fix. So put the gold side pipe back on, put the intake or the hot side pipe back on, put the intake back on, and check the coolant and fire it up. Alright guys, so it's all back together. Turbo's tucked down in there. It'd look better if it had cold air intake on it, which that's in the plans. I just don't have the money right now. But right now you want to top your coolant off, which I already did. I think the red cap's under here. Maybe it doesn't have. Maybe it doesn't have a red cap. I thought my older one did. Pretty sure my 12 had a red cap. But anyways, have like a funnel that goes onto the rad cap and stuff. It's like a bubbler and stuff. They're real cheap at Napa, but I'm not going to deal with it tonight. I'm going to start it up, run it a bit, make sure I don't have any boost leaks or anything, and then check it again in the morning, because it's almost midnight and I want to get to bed. But whenever you guys take it out for a test drive, you'll notice if you're getting into the boost, you'll hear a different whistle, and that'll be a boost leak. And if you're not pushing enough boost, you'll also find out you have a boost leak. I mean, obviously I had the cold side pipe off there. I had the intake horn off. There's gaskets here. I had the turbo apart, and I had the hot side pipe off. So, and there's some block off places. There's many places where there can be a leak. So then it's finding the leak. But so I got coolant in here. I'm gonna fire it up, let it warm up a bit, check the coolant again, and take it for a test drive. But thanks for watching.